Joining me now is California Congresswoman Karen Bass, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and Nicholas Burns, former U.S. ambassador to NATO, now a professor at Harvard University. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Rev.
Ambassador Burns, let me go to you first. How significant was the president's action today?
Well, I agree with you, Reverend Sharpton. Historic decision today. We have not had a normal relationship with Cuba for half a century. I think the president was very smart and sensible to do what he did. We tried estrangement and isolation. We thought by isolating Cuba we could bring down the communist regime. It did not work. And now to try diplomacy, to have a fully fledged American ambassador in Havana, to be inside the country, we'll be smarter about what's happening there. And our ambassador in Havana in the future will have a platform to argue for American beliefs, that the Castro regime has a poor human rights record, that it's opposed to freedom for the Cuban people, and we ought to be pushing that view from inside Cuba, not from outside. So I applaud the president. It's a courageous move. You've seen the pushback from a number of his critics, especially in the Republican Party. I think the president can handle that criticism, but a very important, courageous decision by President Obama.
Congresswoman, you recently traveled to Havana as part of a delegation. How important are the president's actions?
Well, let me just give you the very specific example. You're right. Representative Barbara Lee and Diane DeGette led a delegation. I just came back yesterday, and we were there because in Cuba they have discovered a medication that reduces by 70% the need to have amputations in diabetic patients. Now, you know how bad diabetes is in the United States. So because of the embargo, we've not been able to have that medication available in the United States. Now, given what the president did today, it is my hope that we can immediately have clinical trials, and if this medicine proves to be as valuable in the United States as it is in Cuba, that we can reduce amputations in the United States. That is just one example of how both of our peoples are hurt by this policy. So I'm very glad to see a change after 50 long years.
Ambassador, let me go to the diplomatic side of this. 18 months of secret negotiations, Pope Francis involved. This seems like a very serious and in-depth type of negotiations that was really kept out of the public eye.
Which is quite extraordinary these days, to be able to have that degree of secrecy. I applaud the president for doing this. The Canadian government, according to the press, was an important intermediary, His Holiness Pope Francis as well. So obviously this was a very intricate set of discussions, lots of moving parts. But I think, Reverend Sharpton, the most important aspect is that it maybe took a younger president, someone who was not involved in international politics at the height of the Cold War, to see that the Cold War policy of isolating Cuba had not succeeded, and then to have the courage to change it. And, you know, Cuba is just redolent with Cold War memories, from the Bay of Pigs fiasco of 1961 to the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Maybe the zenith of the Cold War was fought over Cuba. So we're a long time past that, and I think this does give the United States an opportunity to reassert our leadership in the Western Hemisphere on a more self-confident basis. And frankly, we should not relent in our criticism of the Castro regime, because it is a major human rights violator, and it's a country that does not live up to the standards that our country wants to see in the world. And I think the president will have a very strong platform to make that case now.
Congresswoman, this policy has really done nothing, and I agree with you about the medical opportunities. I remember when I visited Cuba years ago, that's what President Castro was stressing. And the president today said 50 years is enough to judge a policy. And we've been seeing, many of us, for years, the policy just doesn't make sense for American interests. Listen to how the president addressed it.
Okay, sure.
And though this policy has been rooted in the best of intentions, no other nation joins us in imposing these sanctions. And it has had little effect, beyond providing the Cuban government with a rationale for restrictions on its people. Today, Cuba is still governed by the Castros and the Communist Party that came to power half a century ago. Neither the American nor Cuban people are well served by a rigid policy that's rooted in events that took place before most of us were born.
President Obama said this today, but will engaging, Congresswoman, will engaging with Cuba actually give the U.S. more power than trying to isolate it?
Well, I absolutely think that it will, but you know, it's also freedom for people here too, because why is it that Cuba was the only country on the planet where we had restrictions like this? We should have the freedom to go anywhere in the world that we want to. We should also have the freedom to bring back things from the country. I mean, for example, you can't even bring rum back or cigars. I mean, you know, we have a lot of restrictions that I believe it's time to be lifted. Again, this is the only place in the world. And Rev, I think that you probably know that right now today there's over 100 medical students from the United States, young people who frankly couldn't afford the tuition of college in the United States. They're going to medical school for free in Cuba, and their only obligation is to come back here and provide health care in underserved communities. We met with several of them. We had dinner with them on Saturday night. And so this is something that the U.S. population needs to understand and know about. I do understand, though, my colleagues in Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, who are Cuban, who have a very personal reason for their opinions, but I just don't feel that our foreign policy should be guided by that. 50 years is long enough.
But some that have that opinion, it really is, Ambassador, a relic of the Cold War. And the American public has moved on this. A poll of normalizing U.S. relations with Cuba shows 56% of Americans favor such a move. 35% oppose. It's a policy whose time seems to have come with Americans moving beyond a relic of the Cold War. How do you explain this, Ambassador?
Well, I think most people in our country understand that we're almost always better off engaging diplomatically than just by trying to put some other group of people in a deep freeze and say we won't talk to them. We should have enough self-confidence in our power and our beliefs in who we are to know that when we sit down with this government in Havana, we're not conferring legitimacy on them. We're not saying we approve of their authoritarian policies. In fact, we're just saying we want to engage, as the Congresswoman has been saying, with the people of that country. We want Americans to be able to have a normal association with the Cuban people. They're very close to our shores. They're part of our hemisphere. This does correct, I think, a mistake from the Cold War. We held on too long, and I really applaud President Obama for his farsightedness in taking this decision today.
Well, finally, President Obama is correcting this mistake. Congresswoman Karen Bass and Ambassador Nicholas Burns, thank you both for being here.